evening.
So I light it.
It's 5:30. I appreciate you showing up for our Harwich Board of Selectmen meeting for January 27th, 2020. I'll just remind you that as required by open meeting law, you are hereby informed that the town will be video and audio taping as well as live broadcasting this public meeting. In addition, anyone in the audience who plans to video or audio tape this meeting must notify the chairman prior to the start of the meeting. I see no one inclined to do so, so if you, let me ask you to join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Let me repeat myself as I appreciate the fact that my fellow board members and those in the audience are here an hour early. We've been asked by the Monomoy School if we could start this early, give them a chance to make their budget presentation for fiscal year 2021. And I think, Scott, that allows you to do this again later tonight, or? So this is a practice run then. Scott, let me turn it over to you and your finance officer, and I don't know, Terry, you can pull up another chair if you want to join the table.
But Terry knows better.
No, it's further to throw anyway, so I'll just sit here and watch.
This is a reminder, I guess, that this actually does comply with our budget timeline that Monomoy presents their budget tonight. Next week, Cape Cod Tech will present their budget, and we'll move into town budgets as well. So,
Thanks, Joe. This is for you, Larry. No, you keep that one. There you go.
it's taking us a while because we're hanging around a lot of papers, so there'll be a quiz afterwards.
Yeah.
I'm gonna replant mine later.
And this one,
So thank you. I first want to,
Scott, can I just ask you to introduce you for the
Sure.
camera?
I'm Scott Carpenter. I am the superintendent of Monomoy Regional Schools, and with me is Katie Isernio.
I'm the business manager for Monomoy.
And Katie, as I think the board knows, will be retiring at the end of this year. So this has been a wonderful team to work with, and I've greatly appreciated Katie being here. And so I know that she'll give us some good guidance over the course of the next several months and help us transition into a new business manager for next year. I would also like to thank the Community Preservation Committee for approving funds to be recommended ultimately to town meeting for the playground at Harwich Elementary School, which I think is a wonderful resource that could be there for generations to come. And thank you, Joe, for the time that you put in presenting that to the community preservation folks. And I've been asked to, I know that we have to do a relatively quick budget presentation to also get over to Chatham to do a presentation. And I always find budget presentations to be rather awkward because at the end of the day, I think the board and the finance committee just wants to get to the back page, which is sort of the assessment piece. So so I'll get there quickly and just say that that if I have in the and the second slide in the packet is the what I call the 30,000-foot view. This is the smallest budget increase that the district has put forward to the two towns since I've been here. It is a level-staffed, level-service budget. All of the programs that are currently in the school this year will be there for next year. We do have a bubble of students that is currently in the 7th grade. They will be breaking onto the shores of 8th grade at the high school next year, and we'll have some FTE resource that will be shifting up to the high school next year. So we'll see one teacher coming up next year. We'll see more students coming up to the high school the year after. And so the high school is going to be growing over the next couple years. And what we anticipate is that we'll be shifting staffing from some of the lower grade levels up to the high school over the next couple years to go and accommodate a rather appreciable and rapid increase at the high school level, much the same way that we have needed to address the bubble as it has been riding through the middle school over the last 3 years. And then the punchline here is, while it's the lowest budget increase that the school district has put forward to the two towns, there is a challenge with the minimum required contribution. That the enrollment that is happening in Chatham relative to Harwich Chatham's is going down. Harwich is actually remaining relatively stable, and then that creates a shift in part of the governor's numbers on this minimum required contribution that creates a differential in terms of what the assessment increase or the assessment change is for the two towns. So before we actually get to the punchline, I provided you just a quick one-pager that I want to kind of share and just do a quick reflection. I just call it a snapshot of the schools. And these are things that we can celebrate. So this is my sixth time coming before your board to talk about a budget. And over the years, we have had conversations on, why Mandarin? Couldn't we just have one AP class and just introduce a new AP class each year? Why try to have, put out a big AP program when we opened the new high school? Why go with a one-on-one initiative? But I'd like to go and talk about for a quick moment, and I'll do this in a speed talking fashion, just the changes that have happened since we fully regionalized, and ultimately sort of get at the outcomes that have come out of those changes. So things that have changed over the past 6 years. We have a one-on-one technology where we have Chromebooks that are given to every middle school student and high school student. There's this JAWSOM intervention hour that supports students with enrichment at the high school. Plus we have a similar thing that happens at the middle school where they call it a seminar block. But not only does it provide enrichment for students that need enrichment, but it provides really individualized supports for students who struggle both at the middle school and high school. And that has been one of the reasons why our middle school is the top-rated middle school on Cape Cod as determined by the state's own accountability ratings. For students who struggle at the high school, we have put in place an academic support center that's helping these learners that struggle. For kids that even struggle further, we have an Oak Street Academy. We've put in online credit recovery for students who have had issues with their coursework to, again, try to address the number of students who are looking at, I don't have the credits to graduate. Anything we can do to reduce students from dropping out and to have them get diplomas. We have an internship program that has grown from 2 students to 60 students in the last few years. We have a digital media television program over there at the high school that rivals any that exist in the state. We have a civics program that is just exceptional at the high school. Our 8th grade civics program each year is recognized by the state for their Project Citizen success. And We have a thriving advanced placement program that's expanding. The program is almost grown by 50%. 75% of our students are getting 3s or higher on the AP. If you get a 3 or higher, generally you can take that and cash that in when you get to college as credits already taken. Our AP tests that we are given have increased in the last couple of years from 120 AP tests given a year to 215 AP tests given. Our participation in the calculus program has doubled in the last year, with all of the students getting 5s on that calculus exam. And 5 is the highest score that you can get on an AP exam. And again, calculus, for us, just to kind of take us way back, my first year here, I went into Chatham Middle School. 8th grade was at the middle school at the time. Algebra was the last chapter in the book that the students were using in 8th grade. To get to calculus, you need to go and have algebra be your 8th grade course, not the last chapter. And so on my end, it was, what can we do to go and get more and more kids into algebra in 8th grade so that we're bumping up how many kids get into calculus so that the kids coming out of our schools are ready for engineering programs. And that has been a huge game changer for a lot of our students and what their college options are down the line. We've got a global studies program that's been put in place that, that coupled to that has world travel opportunities and service learning opportunities each year heading out to multiple places in the world. We have 4 languages being offered at a small high school, which is rare: Spanish, French, Latin, and Mandarin is our fastest growing of those world languages. And we have an expansion of computer science and robotics at the high school. In terms of our extracurriculars, in terms of our musical performances, singing and band, you have these all-Cape festivals, and students get ranked on how well they do and whether they get sent forward to districts and the states. We have the highest percentage of kids that qualify to move on of any school out there. The number of our student athletes, both at the middle school and high school, is skyrocketing. We're seeing league championships. Something we can be really proud of is that our unified sports program, and this is a program that couples students, student peers with students that have extreme special needs to have a sports outlet. That program has really been growing over the last couple of years. We've hosted the Cape and Islands Special Olympics the last 2 years, and we have a wonderful emphasis at the high school on community service. In terms of outcomes, in 3 of the last 5 years, we've had Ivy Leagues, students accepted into the Ivy Leagues. We've had students that have headed off into the Naval Academy, Air Force Academy, and Coast Guard academies. We have students this year that have congressional nominations in hand and are waiting to hear on decisions at both Navy and Air Force this year. We have students that are getting perfect SAT scores, near perfect MCAS scores, National Merit Scholar commended students for the last 2 years. We have students that have gotten the Jefferson Award to UVA, which is basically a free ride, only 4 of those given out in the country each year, as well as the Robertson Scholarship at Duke. Again, free ride, only 4 of those offered in the last, only 4 offered each year. We have students now getting into some of the best engineering programs. We've got students that headed off to Northeastern, WPI, RPI, UVA, Texas A&M, and Embry-Riddle, to name a few. And many students now are getting into honors colleges or honors programs at their colleges, and that has more than tripled over the last couple of years. In fact, I'll speak as a proud father on this one. My son, who's a senior now at the high school, has applied to several schools, and the acceptance letter comes back with, here's the merit scholarship, and based on the fact that you're in the top 10% of our applicants, we are inviting you to join our honors program, when he wasn't thinking that that was an option for him. So it's been really a neat thing to see where our kids are getting. Other important factors that I think are really important here. Our 2 communities are really supporting our kids as they launch into their futures. We have for the last 2 years, over $350,000 in scholarship money is given out to our graduates, raised by our two towns to launch our students into their futures. And that's pretty amazing at a school district that's less than 10 years old. So, so again, some great successes. And then you see what's also happening in terms of successes. There's more and more families wanting to be part of Monomoy. We have to turn away families now who want to choice into the district, because we have been focused on accepting students when there are free spaces available for them. So we have, we're seeing our school choice numbers heading out, down, the choice numbers in, up, all great things. So I think at the end of the day, that's what you want to see a school budget supporting. So that's the, so the punchline, the punchline of the budget here, if we just jump to the back page. So if you were to turn to page 52 in your packet, it is a overall, the FY21 budget is a 2.64% increase over the prior fiscal year. So it's a 2.64% increase in budget. But because our reserves are strong and we're able to use those reserves along with additional school choice money that's coming in, we're able to go and have the assessment for the towns combined to be a 1.78% assessment increase. So the bill to the two towns is going up by 1.78%. And then, as I mentioned, minimum required contribution creates this differential between the two towns in terms of what the assessment change is. For Harwich, because Harwich has been blessed to have families stay with it and come into it, and their numbers are going up in terms of students, 2.62% increase for Harwich for its assessment. Chatham, which is seeing a decline in the number of families that are in it and the number of students in our school district, is a negative 0.68% over the prior year. So that's the front end of the presentation, the back end of the presentation, and I'm happy to go scroll through 40 slides to cover everything else in the packet. We can kind of jump over some slides too. But I'll stop there to answer some questions before and go with what you'd like.
Possibly, before we get to the numbers, costing numbers, some idea of more details on the enrollment changes in the two schools? And
Sure. So the enrollment changes, and I can even jump to a couple of the slides that we have. So we have just one of the things that I try to give both boards each year is just where are the kids? Like how many kids are at Sturgis? How many kids are at Cape Cod Lighthouse Charter School? So our enrollment as a district is down by about 20 students overall, but we're seeing a shift in the number of students that have been heading out to charter schools and the number of students that are heading out to school choice. So in terms of the enrollment slides that we have, the budget itself, we have a slide that looks at the 3-year rolling average of foundation enrollment. This one's important because this is how the regional agreement specifies how we divvy up what percentage is Harwich of the operating budget and the debt budget, and what percentage is Chatham. So foundation enrollment is not the enrollment of students in Monomoy seats, classroom seats. It's what, how many Harwich students are attending public schools anywhere where Monomoy is ultimately fiscally responsible for them. So Harwich students that attend Lighthouse Charter School, Sturgis, school choice to Nauset, DY, or somewhere else, we're fiscally responsible for, so they show up in that 3-year rolling average under the state's foundation enrollment. The same goes for if the students live in Chatham, so and choice elsewhere or are in our classrooms. So you'll notice up there, Chatham continues to slowly, every year it's almost negligible, but it's a small shift downward in that 3-year rolling average of foundation enrollment. Harwich has been slowly going up each year. The shift between Harwich and Chatham in that 3-year rolling average, it shifts a 0.9% towards Harwich. It's actually a larger shift this year than it has been in past years, because it's almost a percentage shift there. If I'm correct, I think in the 6 budget presentations that we've done, I believe only one of those has shifted in a fiscal year, where that 3-year rolling average shifted the other direction towards Chatham, and that shift has sort of snowballs down the line, because it plays out also in the way the state calculates the required minimum contributions. So on the slides here, in terms of Chatham's required minimum required contributions and Harwich's, so the green bars represent Chatham's enrollment. You'll notice that Chatham's enrollment has gone down appreciably. So it went down from just over 450 to about 435 in terms of foundation enrollment. But the minimum required contribution this year actually swung upwards for Chatham. Last year, the minimum required contribution went down. The challenge is on the next slide. Harwich's enrollment and minimum required Harwich's enrollment went down slightly, but its minimum required contribution went up proportionately more than Chatham's, because again, it's the ratio of students. So that has an impact as this budget plays forward. Other slides that we have, just in terms of enrollment, our district is 65% Harwich, 21% Chatham, 14% choice. Last year, we talked about our enrollment and do each year. We anticipate the enrollment being relatively flat going from this year to next year. We know that we're seeing slightly fewer students coming in at the elementary grade levels, but we also are seeing an appreciable number of students that are coming up into the upper grade levels now.
What's that number, the bubble that you talked about? What's the size of that?
So I can pull it off this slide real quick here. So at 7th grade currently, we have 37 Chatham students and 123 Harwich students, compared to what's currently in 8th grade, 23 Chatham students and 88 Harwich students. So it's so there's this big bubble that has, I mean, it was just random chance, but both towns, I don't know what the blackout must have been long ago, but both towns, 4th grade, huge number of children relative to any other grade level, and it tapers on both ends of that. But we just had a bumper crop in 4th grade that has come up through. So the high school, we actually anticipate the high school next year is going to be operating right at about 700 students, which is what the building was built for. It may, over the next 2 years, go slightly over 700, but then, but then fall back down and hover at that range.
Scott, if I may, let me ask you a question about the Chatham Elementary School. Are we reaching a enrollment level that's too low to maintain that school?
No. So the Chatham Elementary School, what we have done is we have been closing a classroom each year. And again, the way I have tried to put together budgets with Katie and our team is we start off with a budget guideline looking at class sizes and try to keep class sizes at the elementary level averaging about 18 plus or minus 1 across grade levels. So you start there and say, okay, how many students do you have and how many classrooms should we have? So at Chatham Elementary, we are seeing roughly about 30 students that are Chatham resident students each year, and that has been fairly stable the last few years. So that makes for two classes of 15, and what we've been doing is opening up choice and saying, okay, there are 3 choice slots in each one of those classes that can bring those classes up to 18 and still keep us in that sweet spot without us having to add in an additional teacher. So we have tried to keep those classes up there. We don't see that number dipping below below 30. It's hung out in that 30 to roughly 38 the last few years.
You've attracted students into those open slots you have?
What's that again?
That's worked. You've attracted students into those slots?
Yeah, there are families, so what you can imagine what we frequently would get are families from Dennis or Yarmouth saying, we'd like to come to Harwich Elementary School. And we'll send a letter back to them saying, well, at those grade levels, and next year we do not anticipate other than kindergarten, possibly, we don't anticipate having openings for school choice slots at Harwich Elementary School, but we'll write the family back and say, we'd be happy to take you in, but we would have to take you in at Chatham Elementary School. So we, again, use school choice to help balance it out. And if there are Harwich families that are interested in Chatham Elementary School, we would invite them to, to come over, through interdistrict choice for those slots. So we have a slide in the deck that just looks at what we anticipate those class sizes, and as I mentioned, the 3rd and 4th grade at Chatham Elementary School I anticipate for next year are going to be a little bit smaller, and that's where we have space for some school choice seats. At the other grade levels, it's in that range that we've been wanting to be at. Last year, we were concerned about out-of-district special education numbers. We actually see this as a point of relief for a change. For the last couple of years, this has been a worry. It always is a budgetary challenge because you have families that come in, come out, or students that that have a crisis where there needs to be a placement. But at the moment, this is a spot in the budget where there's some breathing room for this year. And then this is the chart that really shows the trends that are happening when it comes to choice out of the district. So the green line up there is choice coming into Monomoy. So these are families that are bringing tuition dollars with us. Again, trying to focus where they come in, where there are free seats, so that makes fiscal sense for our two towns. You'll notice the number of students leaving the district, that's to other school districts, that's the orange line, down appreciably. And the number of students that are off at the charter schools has been relatively flat throughout.
Do you have a program that tries to address why families want to leave the district and attempt to, convince them of the value?
We do a lot of outreach. I think while Well, according to the MIAA, which is the Athletic Association, students aren't supposed to be choicing because of athletics. I actually think there's a disproportionate number of students that do look elsewhere because of athletic opportunities. I think that, I think there are families that are, that, and we also know what families are looking at when they choice in, so we get feedback from the families both, both ways. And I think there's a lot of cultural things that are happening in our school. It's a strong academic program and a small supportive
You
environment.
don't think it's an academic issue?
I think for far more, it's on what, what's the extracurricular thing that happens, and at times, there are perceptions that my child is going to be seen by colleges if they're at a bigger school district than ours. So I would anticipate that there are probably some families that may think that that there's something, the grass is greener on the other side. When it comes to academics, I think the data itself isn't supporting that.
No, I don't think so, yeah.
Can I just follow up on it?
Sure.
Because you didn't answer the question. Do you do any follow-up, and if so, what is it?
So we have our school principals and our guidance counselors reach out to families that leave the district. So we have feedback that they collect each year that we track.
At each level?
Yes. So one of the things that we can kind of quickly go through are reserves. We have on the regional school district side, there is an excess and deficiency account that is equivalent to what happens on the town side as free cash. When Katie and I first started, our goal was to bring excess and deficiency up to 4% by year 6. We were able to get excess and deficiency over 5% by year 6. So we were able to use more of excess and deficiency to help offset the cost of the assessment on the two towns. So we used $550,000 last year to help offset our budget. We can continue to use $550,000 to offset the budget for this year. One of the things that we are also going to do this year that we've discussed with our school committee, and we did this a few years ago with excess and deficiency, is in order to address one of the strategic initiatives that we had a few years back, was we wanted to roll out a new math program. But the new math program was going to be a large, multi-$100,000 investment, and if we built it into the budget, it would be sort of a big number, and then it would go away the following year. But the reserves were strong, so we used it as we used that excess and deficiency, or the town's equivalent of free cash, for that one-time purchase. One of the strategic initiatives that we have for the district is to improve the elementary ELA, the English curriculum. And again, we have teachers and our curriculum director looking at what would be the best elementary program out there to support where we need to go and improve our ELA at the elementary level, and have talked with the school district of using $120,000 as one-time money out of excess and deficiency to either purchase the program outright or to launch it into, maybe kindergarten grade 1, and then the following year look at, what do we need to do to launch it into the next grade levels. Again, it's the challenge with that is the process to determine which curriculum is sort of out of sync with the budget cycle, but we have a placeholder in there, and have discussed with the school committee the strategy of using excess and deficiency one-time funds to go and do that. In terms of school choice, we have a healthy balance in school choice, where we'll have almost $600,000 in that account should we have a staffing need mid-budget cycle, But you'll also notice there that we're using an extra $100,000 in school choice. Again, because the numbers of school choice students coming in, we can afford to do this to help offset the assessment on the two towns. Circuit breaker is money that we get back from the state for a portion of the expensive out-of-district placements. We again, want to carry a balance in circuit breaker in case you have an expensive, out-of-district tuition that comes in. I mean, one child can easily be $200,000 or more. So we have a balance to a reserve there that we can go to if we have something unexpectedly show up. In terms of tuitions or tuitions out of the district, while the number of students that are heading out to school choice to other school districts is going down, and the charter school number is ticking slightly down, it's still a huge budget item. And ideally, the more of these families we can keep with us, this is roughly $2.5 million of tuition that's heading out to other districts. And part of that, I agree with Stephen, it's like the more we can help families see the value that a Monomoy education has, the more we can keep them with us and keep that tuition dollar here. I had mentioned
What's your rumor mill on that, Scott?
What's that again?
What's your rumor mill on that? We've heard, I think, this past week at the MMA conference that some of these educational articles in front of it is trying to increase the payment for charter schools to equalize that. Is there any hope of improving the financing for that?
I don't have a read on the tea leaves. It is something that in 1993, when they started school choice, the legislator set the amount at $5,000, and it hasn't changed since. I think the challenge for school districts, I think for us, it would probably be less of an impact than many, because the one thing Monomoy's blessed with is that we take in through school choice about the same number of students, and so the amount of revenue that's coming in when it comes to school choice from other districts is pretty similar to the amount of revenue that's going out. Monomoy and Nauset are the only school districts on the Cape that can go and say that. You could imagine for a district where the funding going out and their calculus has been $5,000, and suddenly that balance changes to 10. It would just be immensely debilitating, I think, on some school districts' budget. So I look at it that the 5,000 is, for me, and the way I've looked at it, it's as long as you know what you're getting into, that you're taking in students at $5,000, but are expending when it comes to per pupil. DESE puts our per pupil just over $17,000. Taking in 5 when you're spending 17 doesn't make a lot of fiscal sense unless you approach school choice from a free seat model. And if you say, okay, I've got 3 seats at 3rd grade in a classroom at Chatham Elementary School, and we could take in $15,000, but not have to expend more money on personnel, that's $15,000 to support your budget. If you take the approach of one of our neighboring school districts where 30% of their students come in through school choice, you also notice in one of the slides in this presentation that looks at our per pupil versus the per pupil in all of the towns that are part of the Nauset district, we are $4,000 less per pupil on average than most of those towns. And again, value for the money here, but it also is how much subsidizing school choice can be to a town if you don't approach it by a free choice model.
With, can I just
Yeah.
The governor released numbers on January 22nd, and regarding charter school tuitions, we still have your line item of, $1 million plus going out with the charter school tuitions, and the charter school reimbursement projected is increasing about $37,000 for '21 in the proposed budget. So we're not making a lot of
Not much, no.
headway with charter school reimbursements.
So it's a talking point.
Yeah.
Right, okay.
$30,000 is a
That's
lot
rare
of
that-
money, but it's not,
Rare
yeah,
that it happens, but.
yeah.
So the punchline of this budget on slide 27, it's a $41.8 million budget. We have, we continue to have a sort of thorough, long-range capital plan for the school district. Where, one of the things Katie and I have been very proud of is that the buildings that came with us with this school district are in as good or better shape than when Monomoy started, and we want to keep it that way. So we invest money in the buildings each year to make sure that they're well-maintained, and we invest money in the buildings each year to make sure that the IT infrastructure in those buildings will support a high-quality education for our students. There are slides there on just how, where the funding comes from. The bulk of the funding for our school district comes from from the taxpayers and the assessments to the two towns. You'll notice up there that the state aid is just under 9% of our total budget. School choice is the next biggest one. That's school choice coming in. So those tuitions of students that are coming in here is 3% of our budget. And then we have, again, we're using excess and deficiency at $550,000 to offset this budget. That's 1.3%. We get state aid from the governor that is regional transportation aid. That's 1.6% of our budget. We also get circuit breaker aid for those expensive out-of-district special ed costs. That's 0.7% of our budget. And then a small sliver of the budget up there that we, in terms of funding, comes from charter school reimbursement and some other miscellaneous revenues. The governor should release more information on where what regional transportation aid will look like, what circuit breaker may look like, and even on the charter school side. That information isn't going to come out until, I'm sure, late next month, and the way we have handled that in the past is if we do see additional money from transportation that's coming from the governor, it goes into a revolving account that we use to offset 2 budget cycles out. So to offset the FY21 budget that we're presenting, there's an offset here that's the regional transportation aid is coming from monies that came out of FY19.
I'm trying to understand the circuit breaker. The final slide in the presentation that we were emailed addresses circuit breaker, and it comes to a grand total of $43,325,885. What is that number? What does that number represent?
Do you know
the budget was 41 some odd.
which slide was it? Sorry.
It's the final slide of the email presentation. It's called, it says FY21 budget GFSCCB summary. So, but it has references to circuit breaker throughout. And, one, I was trying to understand that, and I think I do now that you spoke about it, but I'm just trying to understand the $43 million number.
Oh, okay, so what that is if you look at the budget, the 43 million, so in the 9,000 is the tuitions.
Mm-hmm.
So the number that gets charged to the general fund that is a part of the assessment is actually, if you would look on page, page 29.
Okay.
Actually, I'm gonna, on page 29. If you look at, it's called non-public tuition.
Yes.
So That number is actually $780,520 plus the $290,262 that comes out of circuit breaker. But the total budget, the total general fund budget that gets folded in and then assessed out to the two towns is the $41,826,623. If we did not have school choice money and we did not have circuit breaker money, that dollar
And be
amount would be the
reflected in the
43
43?
million.
Okay.
So if you looked through the budget, you would see that there are offsets to some salary lines throughout the budget for the school choice dollars. That's what we use it to offset salaries. And then the circuit breaker is the non-public tuition, which are residential tuitions for the most part.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
So, then there's a slide in your packet that looks at just where the money goes. So, the first slide was where, how the budget's funded. Running a school district is a personnel-intensive enterprise, so 71.7% of our budget are salaries and benefits. You'll notice up on that slide that, that we have school choice is one of those blue slices. So, 5.6% of our budget is school choice tuitions that are heading out and charter school tuitions that are heading out. So just some of the other slides here, just in terms of the way the budget increase breaks out over, over the prior years. As I mentioned, it's a 2.64% increase in budget. The operating budget is going up by 3%. It looks like there's this huge increase in capital. The reason that that you see an increase there is last year when we came before the select board here, and there were discussions on how can we go and trim our budget last year. We cut out funding any monies for stabilization. So we had come to the board 2 years ago and recommended that we form a stabilization account and fund it with $50,000. We funded the account that first year, didn't put any funding in it last year, are returning a funding level of $50,000 to that. So the account had $50,000 in it. We used roughly $20,000 of it this year to help with the demolition costs on the castle in the clouds. Again, it's a place that we can go to mid-year to go and address, an unexpected capital expenditure like that. So that's why you see that one area going up by 16%. And then again, the debt is debt on the high school, and that debt number keeps getting smaller and smaller and smaller, which is why that number is progressively going down. I had mentioned just, what our,
Michael?
Scott,
yeah, sorry.
started at 50, used 20, and now you're bringing it back up to what in this budget?
So, so use 20, and so we're budgeting another 50, so we would have 70 in there. And again, there will be other capital projects. We keep foreshadowing at some point we're gonna have to replace roofs. That's gonna be a big price tag, and at some point, well off there in the future, that beautiful artificial turf field we have out there is gonna need to get replaced 10 years out, let's say, and it's important, I think, to be providing stability for both towns' budgets over the long haul, to go and start front-loading some of the costs for big projects.
Following up on what Michael had just asked, I mean, I can't figure out an appropriate place to say this, but without being facetious, you're either that good or there is money going somewhere, because we had a recap of our free cash, and you gave us back out of millions of dollars, $1.
Well,
I'm presuming that you put it somewhere, that there is some sort of excess, and it's going into one of those funds that you're describing. Is that not true?
No, that really, I think, is a rounding error. it's just that $1 less was collected than what was assessed, or was $1 more was collected, because we don't turn back, as a regional school district, we don't turn money back to a town. We keep the money, and that's what goes into our excess and deficiency. So I believe that was just a rounding.
Yeah, that's where I was kind of driving at, because if you always were deficit in a particular situation in any given year, that excess and deficiency fund would be exhausted, because it has
Exactly.
to be replenished somehow.
Right,
So in other words, in any given year, you're funding it based on a couple of years ago having an excess that you're dumping into a fund that comes back around and goes into operations again, right?
the stabilization,
Well, they serve similar functions, but they're different funds, aren't they? Your
yes,
stabilization.
yes, the stabilization is for capital improvements, we just approved that a couple of years ago, and the hope is to sort of set it aside so that when something major comes along, we have a little nest egg to go after that.
So, so excess and deficiency by statute, the district can't carry over 5%. I think the town has an ability to have, I presume, unlimited amounts of free cash. By statute, we
Would
can.
that we could.
Yeah, but by statute, we can only have 5% in there. So anything above 5% has to get turned back in offsetting the assessment to the two towns.
I get that. All I was trying to get at from our perspective is that in any given budget that you're giving us, it's not necessarily what we're giving you that you're operating off of, because you're drawing off of this, and at the end of the year, you're putting it back into a bucket that you're drawing out of later on again.
Right, and that's what, at the beginning, when we on the assessment sheet, at the top section, we take the budget amount, and then we list off, the Chapter 70 money, the E&D, the excess and deficiency that's used, any interest we may collect. We get monies for Medicaid dollars, so that's all listed, that we show that those are the revenues that come to the district that we then apply towards the budget to reduce the assessment to the towns.
So the bottom line for me, and I suppose the rest of the board would be, it would be real helpful to know that in every given year, as part of the budget presentation, what went in, what went out, that's not part of what we're asking you for. What did you have left over last year that you're applying? And but more to the point, what are you expecting to have left over to apply in the future?
So there is so,
You gotta have some idea, or else you'd go deficient at some point.
right, so on slide number 20, that is the history of our excess and deficiency from the beginning of time. And the last that we were certified in was FY19, so we were just certified at just over $2 million. So that's what we know, that in essence is our free cash.
That's what's certified. What I'm trying to say is close to getting in real time would be helpful to us, because you and I both know DOR certifies things like way after the fact.
Oh, I see what yeah.
Yeah, because that's not telling me what happened last year. It's only telling me what happened when they did a recertification cycle.
Well, it's what happens in FY19.
Yeah.
So the year that just ended, June 30th. So then in October, we find out that.
My having, and I think Katie might agree with me on this, I think having been in regional school districts long enough with budgets about this size, in any given fiscal year, there's roughly about 300,000 is what I kind of talk about as you can anticipate rolling in excess and deficiency. There are some years where appreciably more rolls in, and when more rolls in, it's oftentimes things that's completely out of our control. It's in a good way, where the governor comes out. I think it was one of the last years, was it the last year of the Patrick administration? They went and bumped up, after all the budgets had been set, more, for charter school reimbursement and, more for transportation aid. So you have money that's flowing in. After you can use it, the only thing you can do is it flows into excess and deficiency, which is why you see certain years where there's appreciable
I get that, but I'm not
increase.
looking for aberrations. I'm looking for, like, in real constant time, what's happening, as opposed to what happened when Vaudeville went out and Deval Patrick was governor.
Thank you, Don. We'll move on, Michael.
On the same lines, but more of a direct question. What is the free cash, not free cash, excess and deficiency number for this budget cycle that you got?
Right there.
$2,095,281.
That's accumulation of all of it, right? From
it gets
all of
reset-
those years?
No, so it gets basically, when the year starts, you start technically at zero again, so it gets recertified every year. So our excess and deficiency for through FY '19 is that $2 million, and that then we were going to be using the $550,000 to offset this budget, plus 120 to do ELA, English Language Arts curriculum purchase.
So out of the $41 million budget-ish last year, you had $2 million in excess and deficiency certified this year.
Yes,
Thank you.
yes.
One follow-up,
Yeah, please.
if you don't mind. So you're gonna use 550 this year, plus another 130,
120.
120. What happens to the rest of it?
It
Stays?
stays until it gets recertified the next year. It's not like it's sitting in an account, it's just, the overall value, yes.
So we get 1.5 million in free cash, they call it not excess and deficiency, and then we buy things with it, we spend it, we know where it goes.
Yeah.
So I'm only seeing that you're spending 550 and 120. And then the rest of it sits there.
Yeah, we cannot spend, except what we tell you and is approved at town meeting, excess and deficiency can only be expended when approved by the two towns.
But could you ask to expend the entire
Yes,
2 million?
yes.
You could.
So
And then when it gets recertified, there would be nothing in the account at that
Exactly,
point.
exactly.
So we could, and an excess and deficiency account's also important for a regional school district, that should something happen mid-year, that there needs to be $1 million expenditure. And, so we would go to our committee and say, we would like to go to the select boards. We can go to the select boards and say, we would like to, for this reason, tap into excess and deficiency. On your end, as a select board, you have the ability to go and say no, or you can go and say yes, but we're going to hold a special town meeting to go and determine if you can use your excess and deficiency, or the select boards in both towns can choose to do nothing and allow the school district to do it. So there are ways it can be used, but we actually can't use the excess and deficiency. The only way we can use it is to actually have it be part of a very transparent budget process and say, here's how we're using this account.
Okay.
So I had mentioned, there's a lot of value in terms of what our per pupil looks like relative to our neighboring school districts in the Nauset area. So your per pupils, $5,000 less than, what the town of Orleans taxpayers are looking at for, for the costs of running the Orleans Elementary School and their share of Nauset. So when we get into the assessment, I had mentioned the big driver there is really this minimum required contribution. So there's a slight increase in that 3-year rolling average towards of foundation enrollment towards Harwich by I think that should be 0.9%. So this, because the foundation enrollment is built into the calculation on minimum required contribution, you'll note that Harwich's minimum required contribution goes up, Chatham's goes up, but Harwich is going up proportionally more. Harwich is 2/3 of our budget versus 1/3 of our budget in round numbers, and a $64,000 increase in minimum contribution isn't 1/3 of 412.
Do we get a greater percentage of the excess and deficiency to help us reduce our assessment? The 550?
So
So Chatham and Howard, do
you-
we get a percentage that's greater?
Well, I've never really looked at it that way. It's all part of the whole number, and then once it's deducted, then it gets applied by the percentage, the extra.
So, so this is the assessment sheet that we would give to the town manager and finance director, or at least the next two slides are what that one-page sheet looks like. So you've got that, you know, that $41.8 million budget. We have, you know, what are the different amounts that are getting backed off of that, you know, of that number in terms of state aid comes in, the excess and deficiency that's being used, charter school aid, Medicaid, interest, miscellaneous revenues. So, you know, so all totaled, you have revenues that are coming in that are reducing that overall budget number by $4.8 million. Then you have the non-operating expenses, transportation, capital, and debt, which get allocated into an operating assessment. It's that operating assessment that gets split between the two towns based on that 3-year rolling average. At the moment, that 3-year rolling average is 74.35%. Harwich, 25.65%. Chatham. So that number gets divvied between the two towns. So you come up with an operating assessment for the two towns. The transportation assessment is done a little bit differently by the regional agreement. The transportation gets divvied up based on the number of Harwich children that are in seats in our classrooms and Chatham children in seats in our classroom actually using the buses. So that gets split by a 74.8, 25.2%. But these get tallied, they get tallied together, so you have the overall FY21 draft assessment, which is $27.3 million towards Harwich, $9 million towards Chatham. Overall, the assessment is 36.4 million for the, you know, for the two towns. And then we have a little breakdown on how that differs from the year before, and that's where you come up with, you know, Harwich is going up by the 2.62%, Chatham's is going down by
But,
0.68.
Steve actually raised this very interesting question because, you know, it may not be big money, but over time, we're increasing faster than that proportion is because they're throwing a bit into the pot, and and that's not accounted for. So, you know, there you go, but it's something to be interesting to look at.
I think it's something that we can go back and chat on our end. I'd have to go back in. I think the way we have done the assessment, there's sort of a statutory method that one does the assessment.
I mean, maybe this is just too logical here, but, you know,
Yeah.
it just would seem that, you know, when you do the breakdown, 74 point whatever it is %, the excess and deficiency should slide over to the Howard side, and, you know, just because we're carrying more of the budget. You know. But anyway, if you can look into that, that'd be great.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Don.
It's an appropriate time to ask that because Stephen's point is well taken. When we first started talking about regionalizing, we were talking about the potential savings to the community because we were looking at something like a 55-45 split, and then we were looking at a 60-40 split. Just to recap so nobody misses this, we're talking about 75-25 now. I'm concerned about, you know, like whether there's a driver on the bus in particular. Have you been, and I asked this last year, so there's been a whole year that's elapsed. Have you been to the Chatham's planner and the Harwich planner to see what their long-term plans for, say, housing are? Because that actually will drive your numbers if they're successful with affordable housing in Chatham versus here.
So the answer is yes. You know, we are in conversations. We are also, there's a separate conversation going on in Chatham that's part of their Chatham 365.
And we're going through a comprehensive plan revision, too.
Initiative on how can we get more families, year-round families in Chatham. One of those efforts on that end is to look at universal pre-K for 4-year-olds in Chatham. And this is something that I've, you know, shared with Joe and the town manager over in Chatham. So we we got a legal opinion that the school district can't go and run a 4-year-old program in Chatham if we're not doing the same thing in Harwich or not opening it up for Harwich. So part of the conversation now in Chatham is how can they go about supporting a sort of free preschool for 4-year-olds in an effort to go and take that financial burden off of families to help them look at it. So there's a meeting that will be happening in just a couple days on sort of the next steps in that conversation, but it may involve using, having them potentially lease space within.
Just to be
Open
clear, I'm not
classrooms.
talking about any particular program. I'm
Yeah.
talking about overall trends about who lives in each community and who can sustain the schools as a consequence.
Yeah, and the school superintendents are also, in this, it's a bigger conversation than just Harwich and Chatham, too. It's, the school superintendents have been involved in conversations with town managers Cape-wide, looking, and have been, we actually have a legislative breakfast with state legislators on Friday of this week, that those are some of the bigger conversations, because it's a decline in young families that's happening across the Cape that gets very complex in terms of housing and, affordable housing as opposed to, affordable houses that get snapped up and converted into Airbnb and things like that are bigger issues that impact us, and I think but I think it's one of those good news for Harwich. The rate of the loss of young families is less here than next door in Chatham, but I think on some level, part of the good news that I was sharing about the school district is attributable to I think we're keeping families here because of the schools. But I think there's an affordability factor in great schools that's making Harwich be a place people want to be, and so I think we want to make sure that we're continue to play that factor along with trying to support families year-round in Chatham.
And just a point of clarification, when we became Monomoy in FY13, seems like only yesterday, it was a 28-72% split. It was 28% Howard, 72%, I'm sorry.
No, I get that.
Yeah,
We weren't
exactly.
planning on that, however.
28% Chatham, 72% Howard. So here we are projecting in FY21, it's 25.65% Chatham and 74.35% Howard, which was, yes, it's trending that way, but I just wanted to just point out it's not, we didn't start out 60-40 and now we're at 70-30.
I was saying that we planned on the discussion, when the discussion started happening, we planned on 55-45, then later 60-40.
Right.
And you're right, once we actually got shovels in the ground, and a new office and you folks were occupying it, it was already much different than what we had hypothesized.
Point taken.
Okay.
That's all I have.
Any other questions, Steve, any more?
No, thank you, though. You guys have really tried to hold the line here.
Michael?
Nope, no, I don't want to continue. I'll ask some questions next time. More on transportation than anything else, but thank you.
Not sure this is your question on transportation, but a year ago, we were discussing the transition to a new bus line. I have a big, long narrative, but how's that worked out for you? Are you satisfied with it?
That's my question. I just didn't want the long narrative. It is
We
past
are-
6:30.
Okay.
We are satisfied, a little bit of learning experience overall. I think that the areas that we're going to be seeing most of our savings are in the areas of field trips and things that it's a little less costly for that. We've had a couple of challenges, now that the buses are parked at the middle school in Chatham and then, buses at the high school when luckily we've only had a little bits of snow. Just trying to, adjust to that. But I think overall, the community is satisfied, and it's been helpful having a woman in our office that, you know, is a point person for families to contact.
And budget-wise.
And budget-wise, it's just what we had thought. It's really, it was a 5% increase in the regular transportation, a little less than 5, and as I said, the savings, it appears, you know, we're only into January, we have a lot of field trips and things in the spring, but it's those activities that seem to be, we'll find savings there. And we still have a relationship with our prior vendor for some of our trips when we go off Cape and we need some, you know, bathrooms on buses and stuff, so we have a relationship still with our prior vendor, which is a
Okay.
good thing.
Thank you, Kate.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Chris. Is there anyone else who, Terry, you want to say anything?
There was so much good news, I wish I sat out there.
You have to use the microphone.
And just
No,
to-
I'm all set. I
You're all
have nothing
set?
to add.
And just one last, I think I mentioned it last year, but, you know, we tried to have a lot of helpful information on the website, and there is a section under finance, and there are 4 really, I think 4, possibly 5, videos that, it's a association related to regional school districts put out, and it's about regional transportation aid, Chapter 70, minimum contribution, kind of like cartoony sort of things, but I think it's helpful, you know, each one's no more than 5 minutes long, that there are links to on our website.
Before I let you
That
go,
just helps.
Is there anyone in the audience that wants to comment or has a question? If not, thanks again.
They're
and,
rushing to the mics.
Thank you very
we'll
much.
see you,
Thank you.
I know we have another meeting scheduled, so we'll have another chance. Thanks again.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks.
Joe, we'll go back to basically our regular schedule now then, and agenda. And you're up for a weekly briefing?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the weekly briefings, again, we'll now be hearing about both Contracts 1 and Contract 2. I'd like to read from a synopsis that was provided by CDM Smith, based on the updates by the 2 vendors. For the 3-week look ahead for this week, RJV will be focusing on setting up their staging area, mobilizing equipment, and receiving delivery of materials. Their focus the following 2 weeks will be installing sewers on Cemetery Road, followed by Southwest Drive. Specifically within that, over the next 2 weeks, meaning the week of the 3rd and the week of the 10th of February, the week of the 3rd, they begin the installation on Cemetery Road, which is requiring road closure on Cemetery Road between Route 137 and Church Street. And their 3-week look ahead the week of February 10th, because they'll be doing work on Southwest Drive that will continue to necessitate the road closure between 137 and Church Street. That ties in with the work that we've been doing with the 2 towns and the 2 contractors, and we have meetings tomorrow related to that. The next update is Robert B. Hour. They will continue their sewer installation on Route 137 for this week, including installing sewers on Old Heritage Way. Also, just remind everybody that this week is the expected extended work hours, because they're doing the deep sewer manhole Wednesday and Thursday of this week. And they will continue next week on 137, which requires detours. And in 3 weeks, or the 3rd week look ahead, there'll be another installation of a deep sewer installation.
Joe, if I may, where will that deep sewer installation be? Do you have that in front of you?
So according to the
Because that's
report
when it
here,
really stops everything, when when you do that.
yeah, unfortunately, they don't have it indicated, other than Old Heritage Way this week.
Okay,
So I'll find out for the next 2 weeks, Mr. Chairman.
thank you, Joe. Any questions for Joe? Anyone in the audience? Next is public comments.
Hi, Judith Underwood, Water Commissioner, and on the Affordable Housing Trust. Just wanted to request the board to kindly consider the leadership transition in the planning department. We're losing Charlene in July, and a lot of us are really hopeful that you will do what you need to do to hire a new planner sooner, so that they can work together for many months if possible. It's a wealth of knowledge for those of us that are working on these different boards, And we're losing Charlene, and it'd be great if somebody could transition for many months with her. I think that'd be money very well spent. Thank you.
I think that's wise counsel. So
Thank you.
We'll move ahead on that. Don?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That actually grew out of the Housing Institute's briefing today. About a dozen people. I was there, and the central point was actually more important than that. It was brought up that just at the time where we're talking about the local comprehensive plan, that if we wait and then hire somebody, that we're actually putting that way off.
Yeah.
Or we're starting at a lower level of knowledge. I recognize the budget implications, but there was a reason for that other,
But I
more
think
than just.
but to your point, I think we're all agreed we need to start on the local comprehensive plan sooner rather than later.
And we know she is departing. That was their point.
Mr. Wasak?
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Mr. Powers, just a reminder, it's the last week to file abatements. Those who are challenging the values of their property, we have to have the applications in by February 1st. So last week, last call.
I think by now, Richard, everyone should be adequately warned.
Should,
I tried, they said no.
Mr. Brown?
Jack Brown, current chairman of the FinCom. I'm here to ask the community to come up with a couple more people to work on the FinCom. We have been substantially understaffed on that important committee for at least the last several years. We're currently down 2 from charter strength, and while the people we've got are just fine, the reality is they have a ramp up around skill acquisition. In the meantime, we're trying to do the whole effort for FinCom running a town meeting. So we need a hand. I need some names, people, that will work hard, stay late, especially as we get closer and closer to town meeting, and people who are dedicated to help keep this town successful. So thank you. Be glad to take questions.
Okay, we have one. Thank you.
Oh, not him.
I was gonna behave. Will you tell us how one would apply, or who they would tell that they want to be on FinCom, and then who appoints them, for that matter?
I don't think I should have to do that, but I'll do it
Well,
anyway.
you're telling the public, and
I'll
I
do
think
it
that they're
anyway.
not sure.
In the back of your town meeting annual book, the annual book, in Selectman's office, there are places where you can look to see what things are available and who you can talk to. And if those people aren't available to talk, they'll certainly reschedule for you so that you can get in there and mix it up.
We don't appoint, however. I think
I know
what he was
that, deeply
driving
aware
at
of
is that it's a town moderator that does that.
As you know, Donald, I am deeply aware of that.
I know, but he was saying they aren't.
Yeah, well,
Well, we share your plea. If anyone knows of someone, or they have a friend they would recommend, this is obviously an important committee.
right.
Michael?
I'm gonna ask the same question, maybe somebody can point it out to the public. Where do they apply? Not to the Board of Selectmen, not to Jack? Do they go into the office and fill out a citizens
They ca-
activity form?
Yeah, they can.
Okay.
They do, and I did instruct Patty, who was new at the job, that she's the office of throughput. She will accept it, but then refer it immediately
And
to Michael.
she's been doing that.
And then
Yeah.
she'll refer them to Michael.
Yeah,
Thank you.
but she needs them to refer.
Well, I got a couple recently, so we'll see.
Well, FinCom could use a hand. Thank you.
Just to end that discussion, we have 5 of us as well. If anyone knows of someone wants to volunteer for FinCom, one of our other committees, give us a call or contact us, and we'll help you out. That's a given, but I'll just say it again.
You're recruiting for more selectmen
I was gonna
applicants?
say, I thought it was 5 of us.
Operators are
Offering up a
standing
seat.
No. No, one of us will arm wrestle them onto the.
Okay, anyone else for, I'm leaving that discussion.
Mr.
Dave.
Chairman, members of the board, just briefly wanted to let everybody know Station 2 officially opened today.
Good.
Yep.
So we're in place and operating.
I don't want to use it, by the way, but I'm happy.
What's that?
I don't want to use it, by the way.
Yeah,
but I'm
no,
happy
hopefully
it's there.
we can avoid that. But still a little bit of work to do, but for the most part, we're in really good shape. Troops were on hand today. We had about 20 for the opening ceremony. We raised the flag, and it was a good event. It's a good time, and again, we'd like to thank the support of the board, the citizens of town to get the job done. So it's official. Don't go to the old place, because it's all closed up.
Okay. Thank you, Dave. And while Carolyn's coming up, let me just, I did get an email today as well, and I'm sure we all of us is out there, that we're looking for portraits of town that we can put on the annual report. So everyone has a great looking photograph of something that brags about Harwich.
Have some pictures of me.
Station 2 would
Station
make
2
an
might
excellent
would
thought.
be an excellent one. So where'd Dave go? Some great pictures of Station 2 would work out.
Got a great drone picture that I just put on the Facebook page today that I'll submit.
But submit those to the town administrating office, and we'll get our town report going. Carolyn?
Just letting everyone know, I know I've been here a few times. We're about to turn 20 as we open a new station. The community center is turning 20. The actual day is February 5th, but we start our events on, you can pick up your ferry door packets to go searching around town. And those are available at the community center starting February 1st. They're due on the 19th. On Sunday, February 2nd, we have Super Bowl Sunday. So we're having soup and we're making our own sundaes, and there's some bowling, all before the actual Super Bowl. Then on Wednesday, the 5th, is the then and now, so you can see how far we've come at the community center. On Wednesday, February 19th, which is during the school break, we have kids breakfast, and the ferry doors are due back in. And then that night, we have our psychic medium. And then on February 28th, the Sound Dunes will be performing. All of those events are free. We just ask if you come, if you can, bring a donation for the family pantry, and we will get those to them. In addition, you've seen, certainly the selectmen have, but around town, we will be giving out in various locations. We have a few little elves who are helping us. These are lifesavers that say you've been a community center lifesaver. So if you get one, which everyone will, because we're so grateful to the community, but just wanted people to know we'll be giving those out throughout the month of February. Thanks.
Thank you, Carolyn.
You've been a lifesaver.
I have no candy to give out, so I apologize. But if you were looking for a few more chances to come into the community center in February, we have some Council on Aging events next week in particular I wanted to highlight. So on Tuesday the 4th at 11, we're having an Aging in Place workshop. We're bringing in folks from the Massachusetts Guardianship Academy to talk about aging in place, and specifically the kind of legal realities of aging in place. So what is a healthcare proxy? What is a power of attorney? What is legal guardianship? And why is it important to have those decisions made while you're able to make them to support you living independently in your home for as long as possible. So that's Tuesday, February 4th at 11. We are serving lunch and it is free. We are asking folks to RSVP by this Friday so that we have a count for lunch. So 11 o'clock, February 4th. And then Thursday the 6th, we are having a census info session, and we're doing that with Brooks Free Library. That'll be at 10:30, and it's just a place to get your general census questions answers. So what is the census? What are your methods for completing it and submitting it? What kinds of questions will you be asked and won't you be asked? So just really general info and answers to general questions, and it'll be myself and folks from Brooks Free Library there to answer them. And if anyone has questions we can't answer, we will certainly get answers from census staff and get back to participants. So we're looking forward to those events next week, in addition to the wonderful events Carolyn has going on.
Thank you, Emily. Anyone else for public comment or announcements? We'll move then to consent agenda.
Mr. Chair, before
Don?
For reasons that'll become apparent when I do it, you need to pull the appointments so that we can make them separately.
C and D.
C and D.
C and D, okay. All righty, consent agenda. Vote to accept the recommendation from Heinz Proft, Natural Resources Director, to appoint Greg Garber as volunteer shellfish warden. B, vote annual and seasonal lodging house or inholders license renewal 2020 for Sands Hospitality, Inc., DBA Platinum Pebble Boutique Inn.
Second.
Any discussion? Anyone in the audience? See, we have some of the people here, so. No discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Passed unanimously. And Don, you want to,
Yeah, I
Back
mean,
to
the precursor
C&D.
to that is that it was so late doing the interviews because of the week, last week starting on a Tuesday, and that we couldn't hit the deadline to get it on the agenda except to be legally sufficient. So I was able to get back and find out what the timeframes were for their
Oh,
appointments.
for their appointment. Okay.
Yeah, so that's why.
Well, the shocking thing is that Jake Domos was in my youngest daughter's elementary school class, so that just sees how old I am. Good Lord.
I'm not
Go
going there.
ahead.
well, yeah, go, move on, Don.
Okay. If there's no problem with it, I was going to read these as one motion.
Please.
I'd like to move that we appoint Jake Domos to the Noise Containment Committee as a full business member with a term to expire 2020. I'd like to also move that we appoint Jacqueline Pence Green to the Bikeways Committee as a full member with a term to expire 2022.
Second.
Any discussion? Anyone from the
So-
audience?
So
See if
Jake's is just till 2020?
It's because of the committee.
Oh, God, okay.
There's a freshness date on the whole committee. It's ad hoc. There are no staggered terms.
Okay.
I don't mean to say that if they don't finish their work, he would not be reappointed
Right,
beyond that,
yeah,
but that's the
okay.
date.
Sorry, I just thought you.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Moving next to contracts. Joe, I'll turn this over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm actually going to turn it over to our Council on Aging Director. As you can see, the memo in the packet. And this is a grant that has an amount that would require the board's action. I support Emily and her recommendation to the board, but if the board has any questions, she's prepared to speak.
Michael, you have,
I move that we accept the FY 2020 Executive Office of Elder Affairs Formula Grant Funds, $53,258.38.
good second?
Second.
Emily, why don't you just give us, it sounds like we don't have a lot of discussion now, but maybe give us a quick summary of what's happening.
Sure. So the Executive Office of Elder Affairs awards this grant to every municipality in the state. So it's a figure of $12 per senior based on the number of seniors at the previous federal census. So it's just kind of a formula. It's administered by Councils on Aging. You'll notice that it's for fiscal year 20, so it's for our current fiscal year. It's contingent on the state legislature approving the funds, which they now have done. We are allowed to deficit spend for expenses approved in previous years, so that's what we've been doing since July 1st, and we'll continue to do through June 30th.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank
Any
you.
more discussion? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, Emily. Old business, we've had discussions, and I continue to, it's almost become a standing agenda item, but I've sent you drafts of a screening committee charge, of a position profile, and of a KP Law meeting law review. This is all my intent. This is in the packet, so I'm hoping to get any comments I have from anyone in the audience or watching as well. And any comments, and we'll continue these until we finalize where we're going. Don?
Yeah, I don't want to throw a hand grenade in the room, but I mean, if we're going to have that discussion, and since it's inextricably part of the text of the committee's charge, we have to have a discussion about whether we're going to hire a search firm or not. And I think, because I personally, after I heard that, and I started looking at what value would be added for the amount of money that was being done, and at least one of them actually presented that they wanted to do exactly what we asked them not to do, which would be to goal 10 candidates. You have to have the discussions all together because you can't get to this until you can get past that.
Well, okay, you'll move me. Nevertheless, I'd like to get some input on these pieces that came up, because I'm trying to define
I was just
what we
looking at the
want.
broad overview because this refers in a number of
Don,
times.
I'm going to, you're moving me to next step part, if you will, so I appreciate that for the transition. A couple of statements on that. I have contacted the legal counsel to give me some idea, to give us some idea of what the scope would look like. I've asked them to, on how best proceed, and I think the direction at least I want to go, and I think our sense is that we'd like to have a consulting firm that will help us in recruiting. My personal feeling is we have a very strong screening committee. Plus, I think we have a strong board that we can screen the candidates pretty much ourselves if we have recruitment going out. And that will keep the price down, I think, to a reasonable level substantially. So it helps control costs. I think it also gives us where we want to be in terms of getting as many applicants, and for the screening committee to take a look at that, and then we can also take a look at that. So I appreciate where you're going. I think we're going in the same direction, that we narrow the scope of what we asked for. And so I have some guidance on that. The other guidance I got is that since our acting town administrator is likely to apply for the job, for the position, the recommendation is that I asked Joe to remove himself from the search committee activities.
Yep.
That way it helps ensure that it's transparent of what we're doing. It also ensures there's no acquisition going forward, that Joe's played a role and possibly conflict of interest. I've talked to Bob Lawton today, and we have him 2 days a week, and so he'll take that role as providing staff support to the search committee. I do have a draft. I didn't get it ready today. I'll email it. I've asked Bob to look at it. I'll email you a copy of what the scope is, so that I'm anxious to see if you agree with me. Well, again, what I'd like to do is narrow the scope to focus on screening, both from costing and also that we have a chance to look at the candidate.
The scope of the search firm?
Search committee, of the search firm.
Firm, okay.
Right.
I think that's what I was trying to say.
So that's the actions I've taken on that.
So, thank you, Mr. Chair. Do you have a date in mind that we would come to the conclusion of who we would hire as the search firm?
That's the other thing I've asked Bob to give me some more guidance on a reasonable time frame. You know, we presented one search, one timeline. It was, I think you folks said it was too aggressive. I agree with that. It was overly aggressive, so that'll be on the packet for next week.
Okay.
I want to get that timeline sorted out and give some more comments on it. What I'm trying to do is to work through this methodically and in a detailed way and get as much input as possible and not rush it. I want to be sure we set everything in place to get the right candidate. So that's why I'm saying these things out in draft, and I come back on draft. And I hope you approve of that, but we'll move forward.
That's fine.
Any other, Michael, you had?
I guess I'll wait till I see the draft to critique it, but
Yeah.
you mentioned focus on screening.
No, focus on recruiting, not screening.
Recruiting, okay.
Recruiting.
Which is perfect. And I think we could go out
I
for
think it,
requests for quotes based on the presentation we had fairly quickly. I don't see why we
Oh,
need
I
to
think
wait very
we'll-
long on that.
I think once you guys, once you look at the definition of scope that I'm proposing, focusing Michael on recruiting, I'm hoping next week we can agree to that and go out. I mean, I think we're all in agreement that with our great job, we have a really good search committee, screening committee.
We do.
I trust them to do a good job of doing the initial screens, then we can weigh in. Any other comments? Don, did I answer your question? I guess I got it out in order, but.
Yeah, I mean, I was just trying to make sure that we didn't do this first and then find ourselves kind of trapped by the other part. If we're kind of skipping around on these a little bit,
please.
I'm looking at the rather copious notes provided to us by KP Law on the executive session versus open session implications. The only thing I want to make sure that it doesn't get lost in all of this, because we had legal counsel guiding us for the county administrator's search too. Everybody needs to be mindful that just because you go into an executive session doesn't mean that when the purpose for the executive session is done, that you don't have to produce minutes that the public gets to see.
Yeah.
So they need to understand that it's not going to be secret forever. And that's something that's important. If you want to say something, that's fine, but let it be known that it will wind up being part of the public record later.
But, let me dig into that a little bit, Don, because I think one of the discussions I've had is that we do need to be careful that those people who send in an application,
It could compromise their
initially,
positions where they
that's-
are.
that we in the screening committee are very careful to keep that
yeah.
confidential. That becomes public when the finals are announced to us, and then otherwise, we need to be careful, that's confidential.
And that's certainly guidance that the search firm better be giving us as well. I mean, you know, because they're doing this across
And
the
that-
Commonwealth, so.
'Cause I think we're used to open meeting, but just to be executive, but that was one of the take-home messages.
There's a different "we" involved. That's the only reason I'm mentioning this, because we're well familiar with that fact, but everything can't be an executive session. I'm glad that they showed that. And then even the stuff that is an executive session, some of it is confidential because you don't want to compromise somebody's job that's showing that they were out there looking for something.
Exactly.
But some of it has to be divulged in terms of how you got from here to there. And for those who aren't familiar with that, they got to know that that's going to be their obligation.
Michael?
I've been after more training for committees for a long time with open meeting law. This would be a great start. I don't know why we wouldn't have KP Law come in and meet with the search committee.
Yeah.
Because this is personnel directed.
Yeah.
Have them come in and have one of the first meetings they have be with KP Law representative. That can go
I agree,
through the
because it's
do's
so
and don'ts.
critical they handle this
I think
correctly.
that's a good idea, yeah.
Okay? We'll work on that. Ed?
And if I remember correctly, KP Law has volunteered to do that.
Yeah.
As part of their services at no charge.
Yep. They'll help us out. But that's a good point. Anything else on where we're going on this? We have some more steps to take. Next on the agenda then is, Michael?
Screening committee.
Pardon?
Do you want to do screening committee? We skipped over screening committee charge and position profile. Do you want comments now from us?
You can give me the comments and you can email me to them as
I'm
well.
gonna email it to you, that's.
I'm fine either way. I think one, Larry, that strikes me is the number 4 review finalists under the screening committee charge receive and review resumes of semi-finalists as presented by the recruitment consultant. I want the committee, and I would like access to all of the resumes. And that's been important from the beginning, and as this is written, I wouldn't vote for it.
I'll come up, I need to develop some language on that, Michael. And that's an important point you make. We need to clearly state what our procedure is going to be going forward. And the reason I'm hesitating on that, Michael, is I understand, again, some discussion with legal counsel a couple days ago, that we have to be careful that we don't circulate those just to everyone at one time. And procedures that some towns have used, to be sure we keep it confidential, is to have a procedure, this is a possibility to, I think, get where you want to, Michael, and still cover it, is that we keep the resumes down in the office and we can individually look at them, for instance. But once we bring them to the board, and then we get in some confidentiality issues. And so I've had that discussion. I just need to work out with her the language.
Sounds good.
Mr. Chair, just to riff on what Michael was saying, I think what he was basically saying is that the search firm is the aggregator. They're going to go out and collect a whole bundle of names. Then they pour it into a funnel, which is going to be the search committee, and they're going to be doing the reduction down to when they give us the 3 to 5 at the end. But we in the town will have all of the resumes.
Yeah, I think you should.
Well, no, I agree with that.
Yeah,
The only thing I'm The only thing, my discussion is that we have to be careful on the mechanism to do
Absolutely.
so.
Oh, sure. I was just saying, though, that they don't get
And-
like
And I've
82 resumes and then they show up with 32 to
No,
the
no,
search
I
committee
agree.
because they've taken the others out.
I've just had discussion from a legal aspect, be
No, I
sure
agree.
we define it up front. That's all.
I'll send you my other comments.
Yeah, okay. Anything else? Those are good, and we'll be sure we deal with that. And I do like, especially the training aspect. Moving on to town administrator's report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, to you and the members of the board. You should have,
Does this get longer every week, Joe, or?
it will tonight. You should have in front of you the latest revision to the budget warrant timeline for fiscal year 2021. I had submitted an email to the board and to several department heads and committee chairs that really wanted to point out the major revisions, and its request to the board is specifically the budget and budget message to be delivered. The charter has the deadline of on or before the second Tuesday of February. I'm asking the board to have me present that on Monday, February 10th. And if that is acceptable, we would be changing the proposed date of the full-day Selectmen and Finance Committee budget presentations. So the new dates would be February 10th for the budget message, and the proposed full day is Saturday, March 7th. As I write in my email, this actually is consistent with last year's overall timeline, and technically speaking, Mr. Chairman, this actually got reduced by a quarter of a page. What I was able to do is go through the remainder of the dates and confirm them, and really to try and tighten up the deadlines. I want to emphasize that really the two key dates beyond the two that I just mentioned would be Monday, March 23rd, by which time the board would be expected to sign the warrants for the annual town meeting, the annual town election, and if applicable, the special town meeting. And I worked with our town clerk today to confirm that being able to do that and confirm the ballot to her officially on March 24th is more than sufficient.
Okay.
So I just wanted to make the board aware of those. I have had an opportunity to speak with the Finance Committee Chairman on the two major changes. I also reached out to Capital Outlay, Community Preservation, and our Finance Director. They're all aware of it.
Okay. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Don?
I personally, I don't know what the other board members feel. I mean, the reason for trying to bring it earlier was just in case we had a got you moment, because we have had those where we all of a sudden get a budget and you're like, wow, that's not what we asked for, and now all of a sudden you don't have any time to do anything to fix it. So we just need a commitment that we're going to wind up having something that looks real close to what the selectmen were asking for. And I'm pretty sure that we're going to get that, but time has always been our problem. We get something put on us and somebody says, you got to act on this in 6 days. That creates a crisis, and no good management happens during a crisis situation. So as long as this holds to what we're asking.
Carefully prepared. Joe?
Yeah, just to respond to that, Mr. Chairman, I think when the board has a chance to actually go through the revised timeline, what you'll find is all of the tasks are cascading down to that deadline of March 23rd, where I know in the past that there may have been a closing of the warrant, a signing of the warrant, but then additional materials added and whatever the case may be. This new timeline eliminates all of that, so that the board would be presented with a full and final packet no later than March 23rd that would have incorporated Finance Committee recommendations and any other materials, so that what you're getting by the 23rd is a full final document without any changes after that.
It's refreshing.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, I know Joe and I have talked about trying to make it, simplify it this year so we can step through in a more organized fashion,
yeah,
possibly
I
have
think that's
sometimes
great.
in the past. Okay,
Mr.
Joe?
Chairman, if I may, the next item you'll see on the agenda, and you should have received in your packets, this was a request from last week's meeting. Our treasurer collector provided the background information that tied back to the actions of last week.
Okay, good, thank you.
And then Two quick items that I have. The first is, I had a chance to make reference to emergency management grants that have been acquired over time. I also wanted to bring the board's attention to the fact that we had received notice, middle of the month, from the insurance claims adjuster. And this goes back to claims that the town put in through our golf course, through our golf pro and staff. Specifically, what they've told us is that the town has received a distribution for the net loss of revenue for the time that was impacted by the tornado, as well as the cost incurred in removing trees, or the removing of the damaged trees. The town did receive notice of income of $74,757.98. So that's a great story where staff was able to immediately respond, put in a claim, and the town has gotten that money coming back. So another instance where we have money coming back to the town rather than going out. And then, Mr. Chairman, the last item I have, this goes back a couple weeks, however. The town of Chatham is dealing with an issue with the U.S. Coast Guard, and what they've done is they've asked interested parties, including the town of Harwich, if we would be willing to offer comments during the extended comment period to the Coast Guard. This is in regard to the decommissioning, let me say it precisely, the de-establishment of the letter C buoy, which is east of Chatham. As you all may know, this has caused quite a bit of consternation in the town of Chatham. I had a chance to speak with my counterpart, Jill Goldsmith, and they would be appreciative if the board would be willing to offer a letter of support to the town of Chatham, arguing against the disestablishment of the buoy. So what I could do, Mr. Chairman, if the board's so willing, is draft a response letter that we can have available next week for signature by the board.
I would appreciate that. I think we'd like to support that. Absolutely. And you use a lot of big words, but they're going to remove it, is what they're going to do.
Yeah.
I don't know, did everybody get that same email? Because we did get a resident from here that was urging us to act on behalf of there.
Okay.
And that concludes my report.
Selectmen's reports. Don, I'll start with you.
Nothing other than the MMA happened, and for my part, I told you guys I was going to do this. I've got various materials from some of these seminars that I got 4 other copies of, so that I could put that down in the mail for each of you.
Okay. Thank you, Don. Ed?
Well, just to comment on something that was brought up earlier. Emily brought up the issue of having a living in place workshop, and talked about certain documents that talk about being prepared. And it just occurs to me that some of those, especially a healthcare proxy and power of attorney, are actually important for basically everybody who's reached the age of majority to have in place. I know we've just actually had our daughters execute them on their behalf, so if something happens, there's somebody can speak for them.
Okay. Yeah, good point. Michael?
I'd like to just request, if we could, an update on procurement. We were given that list a month plus ago. Can we get an update of where we stand with that? And if we could add to that positions that aren't filled, Joe, that procurement needs to be done on the positions, maybe by department. Second would be conversation about follow-up and follow-through. We're often sent emails from staff, and they're directed to the Board of Selectmen. For instance, the one we got 2 weeks ago about the uprooted tree in the cemetery that needs to be removed before a February 8th memorial. It was directed specifically to the selectmen. How I forwarded it back to staff with comments, but how do we know that that gets done, and if there's any action that we need doing? And there was a piece of land about a month and a half ago that we were sent. I could go on and on. How do we know that these things are followed through on? We never get any response back, and I never see any more emails. And often I'm asked, where do we stand with this? So can we come up with some sort of follow-up so that we know things are being done? I think that's it.
And we'll follow up, Michael.
Please follow up.
Steve?
Mine's more of a question. I was seeking some guidance from my colleagues here. For now, the probably 10th time, have had a number of both business owners and people who live in Harwich Board complain to me about the speed of automobiles in Harwich Board and trucks and so forth. And if there isn't something we can do to try to calm that speed down as people go through the center of Harwich Port. It is bad. I mean, I've been almost hit numerous times walking my dog because I'm right there, but I don't really know where to start as to what we could potentially do if there is some solutions. But I would really like to respond to the folks that have asked me about it. And a bunch have written a lot of letters too, so, you know. So.
Don?
Yeah, can I roll back to something that Michael said, because I totally missed it. My goal for at least the near term for the Housing Trust is, even though it's an independent organization to a degree, that everybody knows what's going on, and we don't have the wherewithal to do things. The contract for the support of that is actually up by June 30th. And somehow, I'm not sure what happened with the executed extension. That's missing, so I need the board to actually re-sign the document again to allow them to get paid, because Carol, as she should, won't pay anything till she sees a contract document. But I also would like to everybody to know that we would like to be able to use the resource of the office to put out an RFP for next year. So that's another thing that isn't on your, to-do list that we're adding, that we need to be able to rely on staff to do that.
Okay. Ed?
Yeah, Michael brought up the issue of procurement, and I know one of the requests that we had several months ago was from the director of Highway Department to purchase a stump grinder. And I think generally our take on it was to wait and see what happened with the state and vote on reimbursement. Well, that's been voted to be approved, and I know I've called our state legislators to sort of rattle the chains to see when the money's coming through. But at this point, as I understand, if the acquisition isn't made reasonably soon, even if the equipment arrived, given the demands of getting ready for summer and demands of maintaining the town over summer, we won't be able to get to that then again until next winter. And it would be nice to get certainly some of the stumps out of the way before summer starts.
Okay.
So I was wondering if you might want to put that on the agenda again. We could see.
Yeah, I think you have. I know I talked to Sarah Peak at the meeting,
Yeah.
where the money was, Michael.
And I agree with that. That needs to be put on the agenda, not debated. But we're far past being able to deficit spend. This is a budget item at this point. Budget season's coming up, so this would be an ask of the DPW director to purchase something now rather than wait for budget season.
Right.
Not deficit spend.
Yeah.
And expect a refund from the state, because they're not going to give us one on that. And,
Okay.
So I would love to debate that in
We'll
an
put
open meeting.
we'll put it on the agenda. Steve, just to get back to you, our first direction we take that request is to the Traffic Safety Committee.
Okay.
They've been saying for some time, I see Kevin's there, but are you on that committee or one of your colleagues? But it is frustrating because we've been unable to find a solution. But,
Yeah, absolutely. Kevin Considine, Deputy Chief. That's one part for a longer-term plan. Can definitely touch base with Mr. Ford as far as starting tonight with specifics as far as what time and getting radar patrols out there, and our signboards are getting out there this winter because it's been mild. Usually they take a little bit of break, but we can get the radar things out there. So short-term for us, long-term with traffic safety.
Thank you.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
Yep.
Thank you.